Good morning, everyone. So maybe it's the effects of the national climate, but I have been noticing recently that optimism seems to have fallen a little out of fashion, that cynicism about the way things are has gotten a lot trendier than hope about how things can be, and optimism, in other words, is really just not the new black. But I would like to take a moment to be unfashionable this morning and to be optimistic. And I believe that I'm in the right company to do that, here with our public safety leaders who represent the potential of one individual to improve the lives of others, and here with chamber members and entrepreneurs. Your livelihoods are literally premised on a positive outlook about the future. So good morning to you, my fellow optimists. The state of our county is strong. There is great reason to believe in Arlington's future, that we will shore up the health of our private sector, and in doing so, the health of our progressive government, that Arlington can and is helping lead the way in transcending local parochialism and thinking and raising up our region. That there is, above all, still room for everyone in our community, from those who have every material advantage and every choice and choose Arlington, to those strivers who come from all over the US and all over the world with few material advantages, and to the middle class in between. I actually have three great reasons to believe in the future of Arlington: Richard Arnez, Jack Hastings and his grandson, and Michelle the librarian. If you are, like me, a Pike resident or employee, I know that you have had a burrito from Richard Arnez and his family, from Burrito Brothers, formerly Pedro and Vinny's, that little red hut near Penrose Square. Over Memorial Day weekend, my husband and I stopped in to see Richard and get a burrito, and we were delighted to learn that he and his family had taken on the venture to purchase the beloved Pike Dive LA bar, Lower Arlington bar, and are relaunching it. I think about that signal from one of our longtime entrepreneurs, or like, I don't know if Freddie Lutz is here, but new chamber member Freddie Lutz, who's purchased Cafe Italia on Restaurant Row in Crystal City. And I see these longtime Arlington County business owners still willing to make new bets on this community. We have reason to be concerned about the continuing office vacancy rate in Arlington County. Despite the incredibly aggressive efforts of our talented economic development team, who have helped seal deals to either fill or retain more than 5.3 million square feet of office since 2015, our vacancy rate, nevertheless, was back up at the end of last year to 19.3%. At times, all of our efforts to diversify our economy, it can feel like we are shoveling the driveway in the middle of a snowstorm. We celebrate the arrival of Nestle, the decision to relocate Gerber, the attraction, the retention of fast-growing and rapidly expanding startups, and yet it feels like we can barely keep up as federal tenants, following the directives of the General Services Administration to seek the lowest possible rent, move out. But if Richard and Freddie are willing to bet on the future of office tenants, hungry for lunch and ready for happy hour in Columbia Pike and in Crystal City, then I am too, and in Roslyn and Ballston and beyond, because our fundamentals are so strong in Arlington County. Whatever choice Amazon ultimately makes about HQ2, and no, I'm sorry, but I am not here to break any news this morning, their search means that the national spotlight has found Arlington County. It's found our highly educated workforce, our excellent transportation infrastructure, our great public spaces. We have the right team in place and the right private sector partners to turn that attention into new office tenants without selling out our tax base. And we are making progress on our goal of making it easier to do business in Arlington County. In addition to the extensive supports for small businesses, including our array of bilingual workshop offerings, Arlington is moving into the 21st century with online payment for permits going live successfully in March of this year, and online permitting itself, including for site plans, use permits, concept plans, right-of-way permits, and others, anticipated to go live in early 2019. And when it comes to big planning and redevelopment projects, both our Department of Community Planning, Housing and Development and our Citizen Planning Commission have made it a priority to focus on what matters in our planning: compatibility with Arlington's adopted plans and the key areas of community concern, respectively. CPHD staff has introduced a pre-plan review opportunity, and they've collaborated with our Citizen Planning Commission to improve the review process to be more effective, more meaningful, and shorter. As we saw during this difficult operating budget year, adopting the fiscal 19 budget, and as we continue to see during a challenging capital improvement plan process through the end of this month, every Arlingtonian is hit with the effects of the office vacancy rate. Each 1% of that vacancy rate represents $3.4 million in revenue loss, and that impacts every budget priority, from schools to parks to transportation and beyond. But the road to a lower vacancy rate isn't an express route, and so this community must be in it for the long haul. We're bracing ourselves potentially for further service cuts, for tax rate increases, and possibly both as we seek to restore our commercial tax race. Nevertheless, I am joining entrepreneurs like Richard Arnaz in betting on Arlington's economic future. The second reason that I am optimistic is Jack Hastings and Jack Hastings' grandson. First, our community is growing in population and density. It's no secret that how we are preparing for our growth or managing the growth that we've already seen engender some of the most controversial conversations and decisions in our community. We have growing pains, finding the capital dollars to support an incredibly aggressive school building program, for example, or making siting decisions for highly needed yet not always popular infrastructure uses. These debates have characterized much of our 2018. But as many of you all know, and as some of you attended, my colleagues and I, along with our citizen commissioner leaders, hosted a series of big idea roundtables this past month to encourage residents to talk to one another about the big picture of growth in Arlington County and our hopes and concerns when it comes to it. There was, of course, plenty of concern expressed, but there was a lot of hope articulated too. And Jack Hastings was one individual. He lives in the Woodmont neighborhood, has for decades. He talked about the experience of recently seeing his neighborhood through the eyes of his grandson, a little boy visiting from New York, who is used to seeing a much greater mix of neighbors from across economic classes, from all within a block or two of his house. And this experience had prompted Jack to reflect and to share with us in our Big Idea Roundtable on his much-loved home and neighborhood and how it could actually be home to future middle-class owners like teachers and firefighters the way it was accessible to middle-class families when he bought in. Jack had translated that vision, that aspiration, into the idea that maybe when he's ready to sell today, his property could be home to 3 smaller houses at a lower price point. And Jack wasn't the only member of our roundtables or resident to make that type of observation, to home in on the idea that increasing housing stock, especially ownership stock, and affordable options in ways that are compatible in scale with our lower density neighborhoods, like duplexes, or in the compelling description of another resident, a tiny house in my backyard for my mother-in-law. The enthusiasm for this idea throughout the Big Idea conversations, it really left me with a lot of optimism about this community's readiness to tackle the changes to our ordinance that will be required to realize Jack's vision and to enable a future that includes families, owners, and residents all across the income spectrum. This is related to one of our key priorities for 2018, which will be launching in just the next month or two, or couple of months rather, the Lee Highway Planning Initiative. This has been a top priority for me and for the entirety of the county board, and in fact, we were able to nearly fully fund this planning process to begin this calendar year, despite proposed budget cuts. The study is going to focus on residential opportunities for missing middle housing, like I've just described, as well as the major commercial opportunities along one of the last unplanned major corridors in Arlington. We know that this analysis is overdue, that residents and property owners are all eager to re-envision Lee Highway. Our staff are currently reviewing proposals, and we aim to kick this process off in September. Beyond Lee Highway, of course, the Big Idea Roundtables underscored that we cannot lose sight of affordability as the fundamental challenge in Arlington's future. And as members of the chamber know, housing affordability is a prerequisite if Arlington County can continue to be a magnet from entrepreneurs, talent, and workers from around the US and the world. It's why my colleagues and I have prioritized the Affordable Housing Investment Fund during our fiscal year 19 deliberations. We held our contributions steady there, even as many other departments absorbed cuts. And in fact, we shifted more of our annual contributions into ongoing funds to sustain the AHIF into the future. We are also getting more creative about realizing affordable housing as our demands on that gap financing tool increase. We steeply reduced parking minimums for affordable housing, for example, and we are pursuing conservation strategies for our garden apartments and our other market rate affordable units. And of course, housing is just one piece of our affordability picture. Childcare, which can cost as much as rent for some of our families, is another. I am so excited to share with you that in just a few weeks' time, the board will consider a detailed action and implementation plan to address the acute need for accessible and affordable childcare through a series of land use strategies, lower regulatory burden, and public-private partnerships. The draft plan itself is the product of a collaboration of more than 25 different agencies and extensive and multilingual community outreach. And I hope that you'll all tune in or join us for our 3 p.m. July 24th work session on the Child Care Initiative. And finally, of course, accessible transportation is just as important to all of those pictures of both affordability and our business revitalization. Which brings me to Michelle, the librarian. First, a little bit of background for those few members of the chamber that were not eating, breathing, and sleeping Metro funding along with us during the General Assembly session. When it comes to WMATA, 2018 is the best of times and the worst of times. Action from the General Assembly in April brought dedicated Metro funding, a commitment the district and Maryland soon matched, and a commitment that will put this system, which is the backbone of the regional economy, on steadier footing and a long-run path to the state of good repair. But this historic milestone has come at an incredibly steep cost. The state funding package includes a significant amount of regional funding diverted from highway and transit projects throughout Northern Virginia, and it comes at a steep demand for local funding. For a frame of reference, Arlington's share per the new agreement is about $108 million in new contributions and lost transportation fundings over the 10-year life of our capital improvement plan. That's more than $300 million altogether over that 10-year CIP. So if you followed that CIP and your issue of interest, whether it's schools, investment, parks, neighborhood conservation, major improvements in the Crystal City area, if those have felt squeezed, that's why. $108 million because of the General Assembly funding package. And I want to emphasize that because we need the Chamber's continued partnership. The Chamber was an amazing player this past General Assembly session in realizing dedicated funding, but we are not done. The governor has just this week pledged to revisit the issue of funding sources, and Northern Virginia localities, along with our partners at the Chamber, are aligned in ensuring that we have a package that sustains Metro without cannibalizing the rest of our future. And also costly, although less quantifiable, was that the state legislation sidelined some of WMATA's most effective voices and Arlington and Alexandria's representation on the board by reducing the role of alternates in an otherwise worthy pursuit of a more effective board. So, why be optimistic? Because to reach even this milestone, it required nearly unprecedented collaboration from across the Northern Virginia region, and to go forward has the potential to engender even greater collaboration still. The watershed achievements of this transportation funding package were were the result of extensive and at times unlikely or unusual partnerships, from urban Arlington to rural Stafford, from the Chamber of Commerce to religious advocacy groups. This level of regionalism can continue, and frankly, it has to continue. Along with our counterparts at the Northern Virginia Transportation Commission, Arlington board members have been working to develop the processes, the expectations, the standards that will allow us to speak with one voice as the Northern Virginia region in the oversight of Metro going forward. And if I can take a second to spotlight and brag on one of my colleagues, the commission just Friday decided that the common voice for the entire region in the coming months will be the baritone of Arlington County's own Vice Chair, Christian Dorsey, which is a pretty big deal. It's a testament to his effectiveness and his reputation across the Metro Compact jurisdictions. And altogether, this is a unifying moment for our region. It's also a moment where the entirety of Northern Virginia has recognized the importance of transit. And the face of that change, of that recognition, looks like Michelle Fernandez. She is a young transplant from New York City who came to this area to work as a librarian and chose to live in Arlington because of our transit options. She took the bus, too, out to the Northern Virginia Transportation Authority's meeting in Fairfax, our public hearing on our 6-year funding plan last month, where she participated in public comment, and she captured the authority's attention with her compelling description of how transit makes her own life richer and indeed possible, and how transit is a critical part of the network of services, including schools, the safety net, and yes, libraries that shape lives, break down barriers, and remediate disadvantage. To hear Michelle make this case to my fellow authority members, it was to feel, of course, extraordinary pride in Arlington County, but it was also to see in one upbeat and compelling young advocate the future of our whole region with respect to transportation opportunities and the fruition of our hard-fought and collective regional efforts to shore up WMATA, which will continue. And so I get the cynicism. I share it too when it comes to the national level at times, and I know that here locally, our challenges are at risk of dividing us. There are significant challenges in Arlington County now. I can't underplay that. For example, in a few weeks, we will adopt a capital improvement plan update that leaves key priorities from stormwater remediation to neighborhood improvements to parkland acquisition insufficiently addressed. We will continue to grapple with the challenges posed by the federal government, and here I mean not only BRAC and GSA directives and the commercial vacancy rate, but also the continued rhetorical and policy attacks on some of our most cherished community members, namely our immigrant families. But when I see Arlington through the perspective of Richard Arnez, of Jack Hastings and his grandson, through Michelle the librarian, when I look at the honorees today from our public safety awards, I feel deep conviction in reporting to you. The state of the county is strong because in Arlington, our potential is boundless. Thank you very much.